I'm not sure I have the right voice to podcast. What if no one listens? I'm worried that people will judge me and think I'm not good,
Honestly, it's completely normal to feel that way. In fact, most people in radio don't really like their voices at first. When you're starting out, it can be tough, but the truth is, your unique perspective and expertise are exactly what some people are looking for. Podcasting is about sharing your voice and building credibility over time. You've got valuable insights, so let's make sure the world hears them.
I was once in a situation where there was a lot of drama in the team, and I recognized that. And this is the thing that I did to bring people together. And it gives you a chance to speak from your experience, to say that point of risk that you have, that you're feeling, goes away completely. Your worst nightmare is never going to become reality if you hire me. Even if you don't answer the interview questions correctly, if you can sell yourself and create this comfort level that you are a low risk option, very often that separates two people at the finish line.
John Gates is the salary coach. He bridges the gap between what you know and what recruiters know, so you have their tools in your toolkit. With his advice and coaching, you'll have everything you need to negotiate the best possible compensation package. He believes so much in what he can do for you, he doesn't even charge you up front, and he guarantees his work. So take salary worries off your mind with salary.coach in your corner. You can confidently say, I'm earning what I deserve.
Has your life, your dreams been interrupted? Good news. It is possible to reinvent our lives. People are doing it every day, and some are brave enough to share the struggles, disappointments, and challenges. If you are looking for a new beginning, a do-over, or to rediscover your passion, maybe even find a new one, then grab a cup of coffee and let's talk. Interrupted, Act 2, Reinventing Your Legacy, with your host, Coach Lori.
John Gates, the salary coach. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lori. It is great to be here, and thank you for the invite.
I love how you're able to work from wherever you are, and I can see your background. You told me you're in a wonderful Airbnb. That's the thing about doing what we love, when we can do it from wherever we want.
Yeah. The energy level changes. If you can change your setting a little bit, you get inspired by the people or the nature around you, whatever that happens to be. And it just wakes things up inside you. It's a huge blessing to be able to move around and work from anywhere.
So you are a salary coach, and as you have mentioned, this is a big deal. So why don't you tell us about what you do and what you love about it?
Well, I love doing it because it has a massive impact on the lives of people. One of my favorite moments is celebrating after we close out an offer together with a client and they are able to get an offer that they didn't even dream was possible. It changes lives forever. I've been the salary coach now for about 3 years. I work with people of all levels. Some of my favorite people to work with are C-suite executives, people at the senior apex of their career, trying to make the most out of their next career move. Once you are at the top, or you're running a function, or there's only one of you in a company, there's so much opportunity to get more when you're moving from one company to the other. And most people don't negotiate their pay at all because they're terrified that they're going to lose the opportunity if they rock the boat. They don't want to disrupt the emotional momentum that's coming, especially in a market like we have right now, which is very heavy on candidates, not like we had a few years ago during the Great Resignation. People are unemployed for longer. An offer comes and they are just so scared that they're going to mess things up that they don't negotiate at all. What I love about what I do is I safely guide people through kind of like a minefield. Many people resist asking for more because they're afraid of the consequences of doing that. They are afraid that the offer is going to be yanked away from them right at the finish line. It is a minefield, but if you happen to know where all the mines are buried, like I do, and you know what the safe path is and you know what the safe words are, you can get through that minefield quite easily as long as you have the right guide at your side to make that happen. Executives are often leaving six figures on the table and they don't even know they're doing it. It's wonderful to be able to guide people through this process and to see the look on their face when when it's finally over and they have everything that they dreamed of having. It's just the perfect business for me to be in.
I just walked through a situation like that, waiting on an offer. And it is terrifying to think, what if they lowball me? What I hear you saying is it's more of a strategy, because I do feel that gut reaction of fear of, oh no, I'm going to have to settle because I want the job.
That's right. When I was on the recruiting side of things, and that was most of my career, I was the guy negotiating on the other side of the table from you. So my job was to get you to accept the offer the first time without negotiating. And so I know all the secret tricks that recruiters play and how they turn up the pressure on you and make you feel insecure. So I can see that as tactics from a mile away, and I know how to avoid those things. Sometimes people call me the prosecutor who has become the defense attorney because now I am shifting over to the other side of the table with a client. I'm helping them to get, I don't want to think about it this way. Sometimes people think, help me to get one up on this recruiter that I'm facing off with. The best outcomes are always win-win. That's what we try to get to, is the company's going to win by getting great talent, the recruiter's going to win by making a placement, and the candidate wins by getting all the money that they would otherwise offer you. I started tracking how many candidates on my end as a recruiter were not negotiating at all, and it was 80%. 80% of my candidates accepted the first offer immediately, didn't negotiate at all. About 10% would negotiate effectively, and the other 10% would negotiate so badly that it cost them the offer or cost them some reputation on the way in. You don't want to do that. It's just the risk of that bad outcome that pushes people into that 80% corner where they just don't do it at all. They're so relieved just to have an offer, they're just going to take it so that they can get rid of all the uncertainty in their life.
Is it better to negotiate and get a higher offer, or to come in and then try and get a raise?
Way better to negotiate at the beginning. It's very difficult to get a raise later because, first of all, you lose all your leverage. And once you're employed by a company, now you're at the mercy of the HR policies, procedures, guidelines, and so on. When I was on the corporate side of things, if you were going to promote somebody one or two levels, there were guidelines from HR that said, all right, for a one-level promotion, it can be no more than 5%. For a two-level promotion, it can be no more than 10%, and so on. Very, very often, employees that have been with a place for 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 years, they find themselves behind the market because the merit increases and all those things, they don't keep up with inflation, much less the market. What people start to observe is that it's better actually to leave your current company for 2 or 3 years and then come back. And you can leapfrog everybody by doing that. So it is by far better to negotiate on the way in. There are much fewer guidelines in play at that point. You have a lot more freedom to get what you want and the leverage to do so.
Very interesting. When you were talking in the beginning, I felt this fear that I felt going through it. And so many people will say, don't be afraid, but we're going to be afraid. How do we do it afraid?
Well, there are 2 points where fear really comes into the process, in my opinion. Like, one is, well, maybe there's 3. So when you're applying and you see that salary requirements box, what's your pay expectation? You see the perfect job. And there's a box you got to put a number in. What number do you put in there? And it's like, oh my, if I put in something that's too high, I'm not going to get a phone call, and I really want a phone call. If I put something that's too low, I am maybe short sheeting my own bed. So it feels like a no-win situation, and it creates anxiety. The next is at the phone screen stage, when somebody actually responds and they call you and they say, this sounds like a really interesting match. But before I present you to the hiring team, what's your pay expectation? And I can tell the look on your face when I just asked that question. It's like the anxiety amps up. The same no-win scenario is here as before. How do you get the interview without killing yourself, without cutting your own throat right here? And the last point of anxiety is when they offer you the job, it's like, finally, I finally have this. I don't want to mess this up. The question is, how do you proceed? How do you manage your emotions, I guess, during this process? Well, it helps if you understand what a recruiter is thinking when they're reviewing applications and what they're thinking and what their goals are when they call a candidate. If you understand the recruiter's perspective, you can get through those conversations keeping your negotiating range intact without lowballing yourself. You just have to know what to say and why it is that way. And once you understand the secrets of how to get through this, it like makes perfect sense all of a sudden, and your anxiety disappears because you know that you're giving yourself the best chance to move forward without damaging your pay opportunity in the same thing. The same sort of thing happens when you get the offer. And I'll just say this. If you just remember, once you get an offer, that they want you to say yes. They've offered you the job. They picked you. They've said, Lori, we want you more than anybody else we've interviewed. Congratulations. Here's an offer. Let's talk about your start date now. Now, very often people will just start talking about the start date, and that implies now that you've accepted the job. But keep in mind, you haven't said yes yet. If you withhold, your yes from them for just a little bit of time, they want you to say yes. A key foundational idea in the world of negotiating is when somebody wants something from you, you can ask for something in return. And that's a win-win. You get something, I get something, we both win. That's why it's a mistake to accept that offer immediately, because you give up this little bit of leverage that you have withholding the yes. So I teach people what to say in order to buy a couple of days. Then I guide them through a question process. They're going to ask questions about the offer. We're going to try to together discover what might be flexible, what could move around, what is fixed, what's already maximized. And through that process, we can discover if there's money still on the table. Then you can say, well, I have this small obstacle to giving you my yes. How can we work together to get around this obstacle so that I can say yes because I really want to and you want me to? Let's work together, and it becomes a collaboration instead of a dangerous game of chicken, which is what most people think negotiating is. I've developed the salary coach method, which is a safe path through this minefield. It's a combination of general principles and situational guidance, because every situation is a little bit different. But if you understand the general principles, then you're almost all the way there already. The situational guidance is where coaching comes into play.
And so you do that one-on-one coaching with them.
Yep. I have some clients that want me to be a one-on-one coach through this entire process. And I teach them at every single step what to say and how to say it. I just had a client today say, I had a great interview. Here was the feedback I got. But that was 2 weeks ago and nobody's called me since. What should I do? And so she's going to craft a letter to try to get them to move a little bit faster. She's sending it to me and I'm going to wordsmith that for her. So that's some of the things that I do. I want to make that message friendly to the eyeballs on the other side. Job seekers don't do this every day. They're beginners at this and they don't know what's going to offend and what's going to help them. And that's where I come in. And I also have some recorded video lessons that walk people through the general principles. And that's very profitable to learn that stuff. Every time you change jobs, it's going to make you money. It's a good skill to learn. It's okay to be a beginner, but you can learn how to do this. You could learn, you just have to get access to the secrets and the process that's proven and works.
I realized in retrospect the mistakes I made in doing it myself. Even though I got the offer I wanted, there were still some things. Would you say women or men have a harder time, or is it 50-50?
When I was writing my book, I actually asked men and women. I interviewed 100 job seekers at various levels, and I asked them some questions. One of the questions I asked was, do you think that men or women have the advantage in negotiating pay? And I got different answers from men and from women. It's kind of interesting how that all came out. And I learned some stuff in the process. What I learned is that some men, a minority of men, but still a decent chunk of men, felt that women had the advantage in negotiating pay. And I asked them why they thought that was the case. And they said, well, A lot of companies are, they have a mostly male executive team. They're looking to expand. Qualified women are hard to find. Given that I'm a man, I could never be a woman. If I'm competing against a woman, she has levers that I don't have. And if they decide that they want her, she might be rarer than I am. And so she could potentially ask for more and probably get it. And that was the way some men were thinking about the process. Women are very reluctant at all levels to negotiate pay. I have met some amazing, assertive, great women in my practice. Some of them aren't afraid of this at all. And just with a little fine tuning, they're off with it and they gain a lot from the process. Others are, they've faced a lot of sexism in their lifetime. They have discovered that being assertive in conversations labels them with different words. It's perceived differently. And so they take an overly cautious approach. But here's what women said. Women were concerned. Well, they thought, first of all, that men had the advantage. And when I asked why, they said, well, men are more willing to risk relationships in the process of negotiating. They thought that men were a little more fearless, a little more willing to endure risk. The risks weren't quite the same. They were imbalanced. I probed into that a little bit, and it turns out that women are more concerned by a large margin than men about messing up their relationships on the way in. And they believe that if they negotiate, they might damage the relationship with their future boss, with HR, with stakeholders in the interview process. And it was that one issue was pushing them into the safe corner of, I think I'll just take the offer and not mess with it. And that all comes from the belief that if you are negotiating, you're pushing the envelope, you have to become aggressive, that negotiation is like a duel to the death. And there's a winner and there's a loser. And they didn't want, if you think that you're going to be, if you win, then there's a loser. If you think that way, then of course you're going to believe that you're damaging relationships on the way in. But it doesn't have to be that way. Negotiation can and should be a collaboration that actually builds your relationships. And that's what I teach people how to do. To this day, about half of my clients are women. When I first started this business, my first 8 clients were men. And I started to think, I wonder if I'm ever going to have a female client come to me and say, can you help me with this? I started wondering if they thought maybe a male coach wouldn't help them or wouldn't understand their issues. But over the course of time, that has evened out. Today, if I looked at my clients, I would say 60+% are women now.
Tell us the name of your book.
The book is called Act Your Wage. It's available on Amazon, and that's a really convenient way probably to learn some of the salary coach method, how it works. It's packed with practical stuff and scripts. The subtext is what to say and how to say it to get the best possible pay package. Actual scripts on what to say at every step. So it's a pretty good thing to pick up. I have the Salary Coach Academy as well, which is recorded video lessons on how to do this. It goes a little deeper than the book. And then, of course, people can work with me as a private coach if that's the right move.
You had mentioned earlier that something brought you to this work. So what was your interruption?
Great question. So there were a couple along the way. One, I think, was quite honestly, a few years back, I saw the Fed starting to raise interest rates. My entire career had been on the recruiting side. I had another business where I helped companies to rebuild their recruiting functions. I do interim leadership as a recruiting leader. I've always been kind of a process wonk, so I help people to fix their process. But I knew that when the Fed started raising the interest rates, that the whole economy was going to slow way down and that people would stop hiring for a while until that ship righted. And my primary business might become quite slow. So I started thinking, well, what can I do that would be helpful to people in the interim? I started thinking back. For years, I had helped family and friends and cousins and friends of friends to negotiate their pay. I started to wonder if I could help strangers that I'd never met to get good outcomes. And so about 3 years ago, I ran a pilot. I approached 10 different job seekers at various levels. And I said, I want to help you for free. And yeah, I just want some feedback on this process. I want to develop the method that's already in my head that I've been using for years. I want to flesh this out. I started working with people for free, and every single one of them had some sort of gain. The minimum gain was just under $10,000, and the top gain was around 60,000. And I thought, well, I've got a business here. This could work. Early stages, you kind of feel it out and you figure it out. There's nobody in the world that does what I do. There are a lot of career coaches in the world, but nobody that has the insider info on how negotiations should really go, because I've been that guy for 30 years on the other side. And so I started building out the Salary Coach method. I wrote the book. And the rest is kind of history. And now Salary Coach has grown to the point where I don't even do process work anymore. Like, this is the main thing, and I'm loving it. I liked doing that work, but I love doing this. So I'm grateful that I found this path. Was unexpected, but here I am.
It's so interesting to me how things like increasing the interest or so-called bad things cause some of us to be able to pivot and do really amazing things.
Yeah. And as I wrote the book and reflected on my own life, I realized that I had made my own negotiating mistakes early on in my career. There was one time when I was interviewing with Capital One Financial around Y2K. It was in 1998. And I was going to be an IT recruiting team leader for them. I was living in Oregon at the time, and this job was in Richmond, Virginia. So it was going to be my first major relocation. I was really interested in working for Capital One, but I went through this crazy interview process. They were exploring like 20 different competencies. And if you failed even one of those competencies, you were not getting an offer. I had to take 3 written assessments. And if you failed any of those, you were not getting an offer. Plus a business case interview, which was a whiteboard exercise, problem solving exercise with a trained business case interviewer. And if you failed that, if you showed that you didn't understand how business worked or you didn't have a logical mind, you were not getting an offer. So their process was designed to decline at least 90% of people they interviewed. They were looking for the best of the best. I go through this interview process and I'm like wiping the blood off me at the end of it. I'm sitting in the conference room and in comes the recruiter. His name was Chip, and I'm still friends with Chip today. It's really funny, but Chip just sat down very casually and he said, John, I'm just going to level with you. We have interviewed over 20 people for this role. Only 2 have passed the process and the other guy just withdrew. I want to close this out. So what's it going to take to get a yes out of you and move you from Oregon to Virginia? I just want to tell the hiring manager that this is filled. And he gave me all the leverage I've ever seen before. Like, I had a blank check. I could have done anything. And so I said, well, I want some more salary. How about a higher bonus target? Tell me about your relocation plan. Is there any way we can make that better? And I started negotiating with him. And guess what? He said, yes, yes, yes to all of the above. Welcome aboard. And I spent the next 3 years at Capital One wondering how much money I just left on the table. It was a great outcome for me, but I knew, because as soon as I joined Capital One, I had the inside view and I could see what they were offering other people and things like this. And I realized maybe I just left $30,000 or $40,000 on the table without even knowing I had done so. That was the first light bulb that came on. Looking back on my own history, I started then tracking how much money people were leaving on the table. And I used that actually to justify my performance as a recruiter. I'd go back to the boss and say, hey, boss, just want you to know that this month I saved the company enough money to pay my annual salary. And then the next month I would say the same thing. And it's like 6 months in. It's like, you know what? I've just, in a half a year, you could afford to pay me for 6 more years. And I started communicating like that up the line, and sooner or later they started tapping me as the negotiation subject matter expert internally. I started training other recruiters. We started tracking this as a group. Eventually we were able to cover the entire talent acquisition budget just in negotiation savings. You know, I referenced some of this in my book, but yeah, I think the average salaried person is probably leaving 5 figures on the table C-suite people are leaving six figures on the table. Very, very often that happens.
That is so wild. So if somebody wants to work with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Thank you for asking that. That's very kind. So if somebody wants to work with me, the best way is just to email me, john@salary.coach, john@salary.coach. So that will get my attention. You can send me a message to say, John, I saw you on the Interrupted podcast. Would love to talk to you for a few minutes, and we can sit down for 15 or 20 minutes. Tell me your situation, and we'll figure out the best path.
Awesome. It's interesting to me, so many kind of gurus these days, you can't get access to them. Yes, they're things, but not them personally. And I think that that personal touch goes a long way.
Thanks. Yeah, I was thinking about this as I wrote the book too. I didn't want to just be this mysterious figure that wrote the book. So I actually put QR codes in the book. People can click through and schedule an appointment with me that way too.
Before we go, what is it you really, really, really want us to know?
Well, the first thing is, I would say the most important thing to take away from this is don't accept the offer immediately, even if you love it. Even if you love it, even if it's 20% higher than you thought, there's almost always some money on the table, and there is a safe way to discover if it's there. That's the best advice I can give you, and you don't have to be afraid if you know a process that works and is reliable.
Thank you so much. So you can reach out to him by email, you can buy his book, you can work with him, but don't leave money on the table.
Absolutely. It's going to change your life. You'll appreciate this every time you get paid. Hello, Lori. This is your dream job calling. But before we get into it, how much money do you need to make? And the blood just drains out of your face. That happens to everybody. Everyone feels this, but they don't have to. We sabotage ourselves all the time in this process. Hiring managers and people on the interview team, they're all human beings, and they all have secret fears. And the biggest fear that a hiring manager has is picking the wrong person. They do not want to pick the wrong person, because if they do, what happens to them? Their boss starts to suspect that they don't have good judgment. They can't even hire somebody the right way. If they do that more than once, they might lose their opportunity to lead. There are big consequences for a leader if they pick the wrong person. So that's the top. Even if it's not in the front of their mind, it's in the back of their mind. Their number one priority is to pick the safe person, not the best person, the one that's not going to embarrass them or call their judgment into play. If they hire the wrong person, what can happen to them besides losing their boss's judgment? It could be that the team starts to lose faith in the leader. That's hard for a leader if that starts to happen. The leader might actually lose some of their bonus because now the objectives that they have aren't being met. All this stuff pushes the leader into the safe zone, which is why they will hire a known quantity over a mysterious external party. They promote from within, not because it's the best strategy, but because they know the risk of promoting that person is lower. They already know what they're good and not good at. They'll hire the neighbor's cousin for the same reason. Referrals carry more weight. This is why I think a good way is to ask the manager who's interviewing you, what happens to you if you pick the wrong person? It's a pointy question, but this will get at the point of risk in their mind. It'll get to the core of why they're asking all of these interview questions. If I hired the wrong person, I might offend this key customer and it could cost us a lot of money. Or if I hire the wrong person, they could be a bad fit for the team, and that's going to be bad because of this reason. Or if I hire the wrong person, the project might come off the rails and not be delivered on time. And that would be a horrible outcome for me and for the team and for everybody else. And once you hear the thing come out of their mouth, like, if I pick the wrong person, this bad thing will happen to me, or this bad thing will happen to the team, then you can say, well, you know what? I understand why that's worrying you. But if you hire me instead of somebody else, that's never going to happen. Because, and then you go and say, because I'll work till midnight. Make sure that that's on time. Or I was once in a situation where there was a lot of drama in the team, and I recognized that. And this is the thing that I did to bring people together. And it gives you a chance to speak from your experience to say, that point of risk that you have, that you're feeling, goes away completely. Your worst nightmare is never going to become reality if you hire me. Even if you don't answer the interview questions correctly, if you can sell yourself and create this comfort level that you are a low risk option, very often that separates two people at the finish line. A lot of people think that if they just answer those questions dutifully, sometimes these answers don't address the fear in their mind. This comes into play, especially if somebody's a little overqualified for the job that they're interviewing for. And if you imagine the fear that's in the back of the hiring manager's mind in that case, it's, well, yes, they can answer all of my interview questions. Of course they can. They're overqualified. What's the risk? The risk is maybe 6 months from now, after you've won everybody over and things are going great, I'm going to get a 2 weeks notice because somebody else offered you a better position. So if you're going into a job interview and you're a little bit overqualified, you have to hit that head on, and you have to tell them why you want this job, why you're willing to take a step down, and why living up there where you were before is no longer the right choice for you. You have to reassure them that that fear that they have is not going to happen. That's just a little taste of how I would work with a client and how I can help them to get unstuck from wherever they are stuck. This is all coming from insider information, the stuff that I've observed over years of working with hiring managers. I know how they think. I know why they make choices and what separates one candidate from another, because I've scheduled thousands of those interview debrief sessions. And I ask them, why did you pick this person instead of that one?
Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie.
If you love this podcast, here's a big ask. Will you share with your friends and family, subscribe, give us a review, and a 5-star rating so that others looking to reinvent their lives will be able to get the help they're looking for? Thank you in advance.